And we're back with another WAAAGH Wednesday, where we're here to talk about the stats, the facts, and the rise of the Green Tide, alongside the Dread Mob and the Orks in general. But is it so dire? Are the Orks really as OP as everybody was scared for? Well, it looks like CSM has appeared, and more codexes are on the way with Sisters of Battle, Gene Stealer cults, and even then, there may be a bulwark in the Grey Knights. So like always, let's talk about the stats and the facts. Of course, we'll also go over 3 of the top performing Ork lists. I promise they're not all Bully Boys. Haha. So we'll go over that, give my thoughts on that, and look at their win path, as win path is very important. Plus, I'll point out some key units in every one of their matchups. Well, not every one of the matches, but along their matchup path. So things we can keep in mind. Now, we'll start with our friendly local Meta Monday. So he says the CSM is looking good with their win rate only being 47%, but Renegades Raiders are at a 53% win rate. But as you can see, Grey Knights are sitting at a 58% win rate with 12 players going OX 0-1. So it's very interesting in that. Orks actually do quite well, as when we go over the faction versus faction, we'll see that we do fine actually kind of into Grey Knights. You know, it's not all scary for us. So hello everybody in chat, nice to see you. Gits, I see you. Dejank, Wicked Joe, Murda, Moof, Blood X. We got this, you guys. So let's go over the Orks and how they're doing. Orks won the biggest event of the weekend alongside 3 other GTs breaking into the top 5 spot, while overall their weekend fell to a 51% win rate, and they were the most played faction. So 51% win rate does look good. It keeps us out of the eyes of Saruman. I mean, the GW. So that's actually pretty cool. So we should be pretty safe there. But let's look at the actual factions real quick. We have Bully Boyz with 39 players. So they're by far the majority of the players there are. Of course, 9 Green Tide players, 3 Dread Mob, 3 to Hunt, 7 Warhorde. Shout out to the Warhorde, and 0 Cult of Speed players. They have been played in the last 5 weeks, as they have the 54% win rate as of the last 5 weeks. But as you can see, most people are playing bullies. They're either spamming Mega Knobs. We've seen some other fun, unique lists. People have been using boys. It's actually quite a bit deeper than you think. But right off the rip, you know that it's max Mega Knobs and then other stuff to follow. Just know that even once Mega Knobs get hit, I have a good inclination that Bully Boyz will still be powerful just because the double wall is really good. And you can do weird things like putting Mandos, putting mobs of bullies in there. So there are some diverse ways to play. But for the most part, through and through, they're way stronger if you just run them with a bunch of Mega Knobs. Green Tide, doing quite well. I'm actually appreciating that there's 9 players out there that took them to this weekend. Backbreaking, tedious, hardworking, but it's still really fun if you're really into that Green Tide rise. Warhorde making their way through, but 34% win rate as of this weekend. I like to think that maybe it's just people that don't have fully filled out collections. Maybe they're trying combos just with the Ork data sheets themselves and feeling how it is. So I can understand why Warhorde's there, but it's interesting when a lot of people were giving them hypes, right? Dread Mob, only 3 players, but they were actually doing quite good this weekend with this 56% win rate. And one of the players we're going to cover today that went 4-0-1 did play Dread Mob. So that's that. They had a 40% win rate overall, but that's because I think right when it came out, people were taking all their big stompy things and then getting anti-tanked off the table. So shout out to you. It's no shame in that. Now, let's look at those faction versus faction. So I always like to wait a little bit. We go to Goonhammer. For this, you can see we have a start date of 5/03 as well as an end date of 6/03 for Ork versus faction. So this is where we like to look at how we actually do into our competition, and I think this is good for you to know as an Ork player. That way you can look at your local meta and build up knowledge in what you should see statistically as your harder matchup. So right here we have Drakari, which is, I think, a mixture of, if you're playing Dread Mob, they have 29 Darkland shots per army pretty much. And then if you are playing something else and you aren't familiar with the fact they have a bunch of anti-infantry weapons, they can get the initiative on you, a bunch of transports that can reactive move. We lost our flash get shooting, which are one of my favorite counters to Drakari. It's actually not that surprising that Drakari as a whole are beating Orks. I still think we can do well into them, something like a Green Tide, but keep that in mind. Luckily they're not too popular, I guess. We haven't seen them in a lot of the win paths for players who do well. Then we see Space Wolves. This is primarily Thunder Wolf cavalry going in here. Thunder Wolves just have great profiles. They take up to space. They can take the initiative you as an Ork player. Of course, Bully Boyz can beat them, but then you could just get unlucky if they roll enough 4-up invulns. They out-OC you. Some of them can get devastating wounds and kill your knobs and everything else and just leave your mega knobs hanging around trying to win on primary. Then we, and of course, now they have Vindicators, and Vindicators work quite well. So when you touch them, they can still shoot you with great anti-tank. So they work into all the other Ork detachments because Vindicators are just well-versed like that. Then we got Adeptus Mechanicus. That's a mixture of their Skitarii Warhorde is actually pretty strong, which we're actually going to look at today. And they're really uncommon, so you wouldn't know what combos are coming at you. You wouldn't know what to expect. So that's going to take a little bit of looking at. Death Guard, this is actually substantially changed, right? They were like a 43% win rate before. Now we're sitting at a 48. I like to think Bully are trying to like run them over, but Green Tide does face them and have some adversity. But at the same time, Dread Mob can shoot them off the table, right? A bunch of Plague Marine bodies versus a bunch of Ludas. Things will tend to go sideways for those guys. Even they're already hitting on 6s, so you're not doing anything with your -1s that hits on there, right? Then we have Adeptus Custodes at a 48% win rate. They just still have good data sheets and volume of attacks for hitting Orks. It's I would say this is just at a casual level when you're seeing them. It's a big thing. One thing I want to point out here is how popular Death Guard is in that matchup compared to even the Adeptus Custodes, which is an easy army to attain. Those sustained hits are feeling missed from those other detachments. Yeah, for sure. That's why people really like Warhorde. Then we have Eldari with the 50%. I love to see it. I love to see it. They're just high value damage shots. So your detachment will vary on how effective you are against them, but they hate being run down, which is what we do to everybody, right? Chaos Space Marines, this is subject to change, but just keep in mind as of today, 6, 5, 24, it's a 50% win rate. Now we will see how that ends up changing in the future. Grey Knights, like I pointed out earlier, with the 50% win rate against them. I will talk about them later in the stream, and one of the combos I think you should be aware of as an Ork player. This is about pressure and you knowing their rules, as if you activate their reactive abilities, you can end up getting punished for that. And screening, of course, right? Adeptus Sororitas, which was seen as one of the bully factions, but they're going to get a book soon. Let's see how that ends up looking out. T-Sons, you know, if you have 1 wound, you're weak army, weak army, you have you're losing your invuln saves, you're losing your great armor saves. They could just put a bunch of flamer shots into you. Magnus can be a bully. If you end up targeting him, you can waste a bunch of your resources in that. But it does take a really high level skill player to play. I happen to know one, and I've seen him. He goes hard, but he's an exception, right? So if you're facing them, you need to do your research so that you don't get doom bolted and you don't get, you know, different abilities like their characters that can reduce your movement and your shenanigans, reduce your movement, charging potential, all that. But that's really up to your study case and your meta. Black Templars have been nerfed into balance with us, I guess, at a 51% win rate. Necrons, Hypercrypt still doing its thing. We got the Wraith bricks going in there. This is one of those things where, did you do your homework on what that detachment does? If you do, and you bring the one-shotting combos that we have, let's say you have a Gaz, the Beast Snagger Boys, you're just punching through in the Katans. If you're dealing with Wraiths, normal boys, knobs, even Bully Boyz might be able to hold out there and survive and just be like, well, you're not killing me at all. It gets pretty fun out here against Necrons, but it does require you to know their abilities. Blood Angels, the Sun Sanguinius, are very effective into Orks with their profiles. Even their chain swords are damaging. Their power fists get up to strength 10, so they can wound your elite infantry. But they do run out of steam, so fighting on death is a huge factor in there, alongside World Eaters. Fighting on death, knowing your strats, CP management is one of those things that you have to use for Blood Angels and World Eaters, because they're initiative taking armies and elite infantry. So when they do get into you, they're gonna pretty much corrupt and kill your unit, but that's why you have to take advantage of our strats and take them down with you, right? Tyranids have been a consistent, somewhat strong matchup against us, just because we do at times lack the data sheets as anti-monster to kill them, but we've seen the Swarm come around, which we'll talk about later. Imperial Knights, that has gone in our favor, just like Leagues of Voltan, which is surprising. Not surprising, we'll just say fun to see, because Leagues of Voltan had happened to be one of our hard matchups for a long time. They're one of our most losing armies, like top 3, they were beating us. This has totally changed with the new detachment ability. Something like Bully Boyz, they just hate to see. And on paper, they sometimes can handle Green Tide, but they have to bring the right combos and not get tagged. Tau will, you know, for the big bully boy Taus, sorry, this is funny, ironic, right? But for the big bad bullies that Taus would seem to be, Orks don't seem to do that horribly into them, as we could still close the distance on them. Something like Bully Boyz, where it's like, well, you better hope I don't roll 4-ups, because then I'm in you, I'm tagging you, I'm tearing down your transports. And sometimes they tend to go for more killy, which means they lack screens, and you can get them to them faster than they want. Then we have all of our favorable matchups. Something that's going to switch on its head is Astra Militarum. I do think that's because they took a direct nerf in their indirect. Sorry, that sounds funny, right? They took a direct nerf to their indirect, which is the biggest challenge into them. In that, they ended up taking less infiltrating units to hold back units like armies like Orks. Therefore, now they're trying to go toe-to-toe with tanks, and when they get tagged, they just lose out on primary and get dogged behind. But they do have a new interesting archetype on the rise. So that's how the factions are, with faction versus faction with the Orks. Now, like always, we're going to go over one of our first lists that we're going to go over. Shout out to WAAAGH again in the chat. Sign up for an RTT. Let's go. You got this, you guys. To make sure you get your armies right? Get at least one rep in if you can, especially with Tracy. So let's look at the first performing Ork player. So we have, let's see here. I'm going to go Martin Hallgren. Now, Martin Hallgren was sorry, what country was this? I had a brain fart. I think it was Germany. No, it was Sweden. So Sweden, just for anybody's reference sake, it was a smaller GT of 36 players. Vikings Games Battle for Valheim. He was using the ITC scoring. So in that, I actually prepared a presentation of his list for easier viewing pleasure, which was suggested to me by the chat anyways. So let's take a look at Martin's list. This was the almighty Dread Mob, sitting at 1995 points. We have the one and only Big Mech with Smoky Gubbins. Yes, guys, you've seen it. The Big Mech has finally made his appearance, running through walls with some bricks of boys, because we have alongside him a War Boss and the Smoky Gubbins enhancement on that Big Mech with a 20-man unit of boys riding in a battle wagon. Let's get a shout out for that. That battle wagon did have a zap gun and hard case. So that was great to see. Of course, there's a chance that he put big shock attack guns in there, but we have 3 Big Mech with shock attack guns. One of them had Get Finder goggles to ignore light cover. We don't see the push the button faster. I think that's because, according to your interpretation, you have to roll for both of them, and sometimes it's just you just really need to get sustained 6s on the Luda so you can get the volume you need to actually put some saves on people. Then we have a Boar Boss, like we said, but Zagrot Wartznaga alongside a 20-man unit of Gretchen. You see that there at the bottom of the screen. I love that they're battle line, right? And I love that this has more. This has 4 units of Gretchen, one of those being a 20-man unit or 22-man unit. That's great to see. I think that was a factor for Dread Mob, having just more Grots taking advantage of the battle line. So battle line, we have the boys and 4 units of Grots, 2 trucks for the transports, 1 battle wagon with the big Zappa. Gork not for his point efficiency, in my opinion, just because he's cheaper than the Morkanot, and he's punching volume of the shots, which is something you kind of lack surprisingly in Dread Mob. You lack against like hordes and such like that. The 3 units of Ludas all were 10-man units with 2 spanners, each having the custom Mega Blasters. So I'm totally in love with the rockets, but that's just my opinion. If you're going for the D6 damage, hey, you just go for it. Everybody loves D6 damage when it goes good, but it sucks when it goes bad. I just guess I love to go for just a nice, solid round 3 damage for the reliability. So, but it is actually 3 flat shots, I believe, with the custom Mega Cannon too. Last but not least, we have 3 mech guns, each with the Smasher guns. Yes, the Smasher guns in the mech gun unit has made a comeback. Now, there is a slight chance that the Big Mech did go alongside the mech guns and give them Smoky Gubbins and allow them to move through terrain. I don't know for the fact because I didn't speak to Morgan Halvern, but I just have a feeling that it was probably a matchup dependent call, right? Some games you could decide you want boys to be able to run through screens. Some games you needed your mech guns to get through terrain. We do know this is ITC, possibly WTC terrain, so we know there were some thin walls that maybe he could try to get through. Very careful when you're measuring for that. And then 2 units of Storm Boys. So like always, we like to go over his win path. So for Molten Harvin's win path, he did tie his 3rd game, by the way. So let's go over his 1st game. So in his 1st game, he went against, let me zoom in on this so you guys can actually see. He went against Space Marines with the Gladius Task Force. We have the Apothecary Biologist with Fire Discipline, Blade Guard Ancient Lieutenant as the Warlord. Then we have Intercessors, 1 unit of Aggressors with the Boltstorm Goblins, another unit of Assault, 2 units of Assault Intercessors with Jetpacks, simply 5-man units, a Blade Guard Veteran Squad maxed out, Inceptors with the Plasma Exterminators. This is more for, maybe I'm getting trucks shooting them down, but for the majority of the time, you're kind of just going with them against Orks. You could drop and get the initiative and try to kill something, but so many times that could just go wrong and you lose a very nice, effective unit. So we have 2 units of Scouts, 2 units of Ballistic Dreads. I think these guys are just underwhelming in the Ork matchup. Their frag cannons don't really do great because they're only strength 4. Then their last cannons just low volume. Even against the battle wagon, you're not doing great. And his data sheet ability, hopes priority damage. We have the Reaper, which is good, for the most part if you're looking for that anti-infantry. Then we have a Land Raider Redeemer, which is fantastic, and a Repulsor Executioner. So he's going for the transport, long range, anti-tank firepower, which is actually something you don't really love to see as a Dread Mob player. Yet it always comes down to, can I kill the rest of your list and scoring potential? When you have 30 Ludas, you can destroy all of these wound 2 wound units that are T4. People wonder how that -1 AP gets anywhere when there's cover all over the game. That's because just making people take 3-up saves is something you must learn to love as an Ork player. If you could put those 3-up saves on people, damage 2, that's how you get the kills through. I'm telling you, that goes for melee and even for shooting. That's why the Ludas shine. Love to see it. Taking out the Scouts, Overwatching is fantastic. People still have to play the mission, still have to play the primary, and you have the 20-man units of boys to just take on the Blade Guard, stay in the middle of the table, gunk up anything that wants to go there. So not surprised at all by that win. Orks just do quite well, as we've seen earlier, into Space Marines. It's one of our winningest matchup. Then in his second matchup, we have Eldari. We have Zed with a friendly tournament Saturday, bringing Gaz and Bully. And that's a point right there. I'll get into that in a second. Don't let me forget that. And thanks, Slapshot. Yeah, we're going over Dread Mobs. Hey, you need to start buying. Yeah, I feel you on that. You're like, what do I need to buy? Oh, Ludas. That seems the answer is Ludas. And last but not least, shout out to Mark Perry, which we're hoping to have on the show later, maybe in next week or something, to go over his amazing list that he did really well with and was very unique, which, I like to bring you guys the most unique list, the most fun list. That way you can feel like there's more to your world than just Mega Knobs. So in this matchup, we have Eldari. So as an Eldari matchup, we have an Artark Wayleaper, the Avatar Kane, and shout out to Mark Perry, Farseer, Skyrunner, Fugan, and Solitaire. Okay, this is somewhat typical Eldar list. You need the boys to get back up. You need the Avatar King because he's fantastic. And let's see what else you have. A Falcon. Falcon's all right. It's that you really just want his bright lances and his cannons for the value of his shots. The Fire Dragons are their new version of I'm going to get out and destroy you, which is, does he have transports? I don't see it, but Fire Dragons are still pretty solid. Rangers, Shadow Spectre, Shroudrunner, Swooping Hawks, Warwalker. Deceitfully actually durable. Unless you're doing big shells for bigger gets on them, then they're not anymore, right? Warp Spider. These is another unit that's 2 wounds that's typically is actually quite annoying, and you're not really getting a good trade. In this case, you actually are with the Warp Spiders. Not to mention, Big Shock Attack Gun is in things like this. So Warwalkers are getting plastered in this kind of matchup. Shadow Specters as well. They're low toughness. The Gorkanot's still running around the table. It's really interesting to see that how good this Dread Mob list did. We have, of course, all of the Grots to run up to the middle of the table, take OC primary, and then the boys to send the bog down something like the Avatar of Cain when he comes out until he can get isolated and shot off the table. It's interesting how when you really think about it, Ludas do great, and then you start bringing boys onto the list, which is, I think, something you really, really need for your Dread Mob list. And it's really interesting because a lot of different factions and detachments of Orks can take advantage of 20-man units of boys. So if you have your 20-man units of boys on the shelf, but you're playing something a little different, consider them. They do fine in Cult of Speed, I don't know about the Hunt. Sorry, take that back. Cult of Speed, Green Tide, Bully Boyz, all of that. War Horde, you can still take advantage of your boys because there's a lot to the game that has to do with sticky objectives and playing in the middle of the table. And as for something we've seen up here, he said, I wanted to say, and we talk about the Bully Boyz. We're going to talk about Bully Boyz a lot earlier, but I'd say Gaz is awesome. Straight up data sheet. But the question lies, does Gaz really need to be in the Bully Boyz list, right? I'll let you chat get into that. When we cover Bully Boyz, I'll start talking about that too. But shout out for signing up for event. That's fantastic. You bringing a wagon, or is he going to be on foot? Yeah. Okay. He's I don't know if I'd put Gaz on the wagon. So his third matchup, this was his tie, right? So his tie was the Tyrannid Unrelenting Unending Swarm. Now, earlier I mentioned how the Dread Mob actually does have an issue into swarms. This is where you're like, ooh, I hope Zodrad and the boys don't get taken off the table here, because I really need them to deal with all these bodies. So let's take a look, because I already see the problem with the Brood Lord. We have a Death Leaper, Neural Tyrant, and Old One-Eye. So 20-man unit of Gargoyles, 2 20-man units of Hormagants, Termagant, followed by a Biovore. The Gene Stealers. Now, why is the Gene Stealers important? Because this is what's going to be running into either the unit of boys or Zagrat's units and just deleting them off the table. You actually are glad that you have the Grotz and Zagrat for something like this, as you don't want those devastating wounds to really run into anything on your list, possibly other than Zod, if he can stop everything, right? Yeah, you are giving up something for that. So there's this and that. If you do call a wall, you might get lucky, and the Grotz might be able to punch out the Gene Stealers. Probably not, but you could dismember them maybe. It's interesting how that's, you know, an option, but just funny food for thought. We have a 20-man unit of Neurogons, a Neurolictor, a Psychophage. Hey, shout out to you, Cheapy. Ripper Swarms, and a Screamer Killer. Kind of fun that he I'm just gonna say, because I don't see Tyrannids too. Kind of fun that he has a Screamer Killer and a Psychophage and a Neurolictor on this list. It is a bit different than the Unrelenting Swarms that I've seen before. The Hormagants being able to advance and charge is great, and the unit of Gargoyles being able to move, shoot, and then move again. Also, they could actually advance and shoot. So that could be in a move, which is their 12-inch from being Gargoyles, I believe. Then they advance, so it's D6. They shoot. As long as they shoot, they can end up moving. I think they have to hit you once. And then they can get right in your way, screening you, taking up OC. It's really problematic. Plus, Old One-Eye, 5 I feel no pain built in. He's pretty tough. So as for how I think this went into a draw, really the Ork player was just smart to bog down the objectives and block out with something like a Morkanath that's really not going to die in this matchup too reliably. Even it really would take One-Eye to get to him. You do still have the boys to hold and play the game and not really get run over by any of this stuff. And then the Ludas, if they focus fire stuff on objectives, they can end up killing them. You do hope that for some reason the Tyranids fail a battle shock test. They probably won't, because they're rolling 3d6. But, you know, the big shock attack guns are making them take battle shock. So in this matchup, this is the one time where you're really hoping those shock attack guns are getting you to take battle shock tests and failing, because Unending Swarm, you just get them to the OC. You're like, whoop, there you go. I swung the game and now we're tied. So because it was ITC scoring, we don't know who actually got the better end of that, but it was pretty close. So 10-10, as I like to say. After this, he went into another matchup of his fourth game. His fourth game was against the Imperial Knights. So it's interesting because Imperial Knights could be annoying for Orks, but he got a straight 20 on this list. Canis Rex is fantastic. I will pull up his data sheet just because I feel like people should know. So here we go. Canis Rex, which we will see later in the stream, he does make a great ally as well, but he does have a great data sheet ability called Chainbreaker, where he scores critical 5+ lethal hits, which is you could look at all his weapons and they all have sustain 1, so he's getting sustain 5+ whenever he's just going. Of course, he also gets free 0 CP strat. He can use that to interrupt. He can use that to tank shock for free. So all in all, he's fantastic. Of course, you can see his dumb damage 9, but even his 2d6 low intensity cannon with blast and sustain 1 can get lucky and put some good volume into you. So he can choose. I could do some valuable 2 damage shots here. I can straight up 1-shot the Gorkanaut from here. It's pretty much hilarious. So other than that, Canis Rex, here you go, everybody. Keep an eye out for him. He does make for a very popular sorry, I put that in the way. He does make for a very popular ally. So, and just straight up on the Imperial Knights list. Then we have the Castellan Knight Lancer. That's another one that gives free tank shock, and he likes to take the initiative on you. Knight Gallant. So I would say this is not the most competitive Imperial Knight list, as it is a bunch of big stompy knights for Imperials, and Sadly, they're not the most efficient, but it is really fun to see and really killing. Caladius, which of course, Dreadmob, big shells for bigger gets. Things are going your way. If they just mess up once on their way, you do have the tools to take out those big knights. Caladius Assassin, Evasaur Assassin, and Inquisitorial Henchman, so he can hopefully play the game. But like I said, as you can see, he got 20 points on him, which means he did handle it. And there might have been, a little bit of unluckiness on the knight player to actually get taken out too early and too quickly. Last but certainly not least, he went against the new Chaos Space Marine. So I don't know everything about these guys, but I do know just enough to say that as much as this looks like a meme list, there were a little bit of things to take in mind that with the Warpsmith, you can end up getting rerolls to hit on some of these things. They have a bunch of different enhancements to give the demon engine to stuff like a Vindicator so that they can do other abilities. I think they have +1 to wound, -1 AP in addition. He still has 3 units of Warp Challenge, which are great. Do not let them get to your Ludas. And something like the Corn Lord of Skulls, he does shoot pretty dang hard, so he could take out something like the Gorkanaut if he gets lucky. He can take out a Battle Wagon. Of course, with the Forge Fiends, they are only strength 10, but this is where getting additional AP or +1 to wound, re-rolling hits. Of course, they can still Demon Pact, so they can still get lethal, they can still get sustain. So all in all, this is actually more deadly than it would seem. They are limited with their ability to move around the table, but it actually is pretty awesome of a list. So he did end up playing it in the late game because it actually did have teeth. So it was another nice, respectable win. It's something you have to keep in mind because CSM have a deep codex just like us where they can actually flex into a bunch of different detachments. And the more knowledge you have for each of these kind of detachments, it greatly increases your chance to win. Because as you can see, even though it's a Dread Mob, which is actually good counter into all these vehicles and tanks, he had an 11-point win, very close, almost ended up being in the draw. So shout out to Martin Hallgren in Sweden. Whoa, for going 4-0-1 with the Dread Mob, showing us that Ludas were definitely the real deal. We knew that on paper and mathematically they were, but in practicality, how were you playing on the table? And it seems like putting them in reserves, even jumping out of trucks. If you can put them on terrain and get plunging fire, my goodness, you will really get the most value out of them. But all in all, the shock attack gun is where it needs to be at. We've finally seen the Big Mag making his appearance. He could flex into the mech guns, as we've seen on this list before. I'll show up the list one more time before we move on. I'll show the list of Martin Hallgren's list one more time before we move on to our next list. But he had Zagrod, 20 Gretchen, 20-man unit of boys, and a war boss. Like I said, I think there is a flex with the Big Mech. Either mech guns or with the boys. I can understand both, and I'm happy to see him regardless, as nobody really took him that serious, but we all wanted to be. Shout out to the Zap gun on this Battle Wagon, though. He intentionally brought that. So Martin Hallgren, thanks for playing the Dread Mob and making us Orks know that there's something out there more than the Bully Boyz. So before I move on to the next list, let me look at what chat got to say. Slapshot's been playing Bully Boyz, and Gaz has been an all-star because Makari's 2-up invuln save. As long as you do not let Makari get grenaded, right? Because that's really how you kill him, or any kind of devastating precision. As we will look at soon in our matchups, something like Grey Knights has the tool to take out Makari. He says, I've had an entire army pun damage and take Makari and Gaz. Yeah, I know, right? Armor of Contempt and the Feel No Pain. Oh, that's crazy. What's up, Admiral No Beard? Speed Boss in the house. Yeah, Speed Boss. There was no Speed Boss players this weekend, my friend. None. Zero. Absolutely zero. We had no results from Speed Mob this weekend, so where were you? We're all waiting for you to shine. Whoa. Day, I'm a fan of the new Gas in the Wagon capacity. I'm glad that they actually FAQ'd that. They cared about our feelings. They cared about intentions. All the guys that were excited to that for some reason that we couldn't run Gas on the Wagon and we're showing it off. What were you doing? I mean, I guess you were bringing the attention to GW. I give you the benefit of the doubt. Thank you, Denver Rogers, for that. Ludas are showing us the way, Ricky Brown. That's what's up. Bonus for taking the Big Mac Zap guns. And yeah, 100%. Aaron, thanks for using them for the boys. Smoking gubbins and that many boys is great. Yes, it is, right? It makes it so like the volume, because the reason why Smoky Gubbins is interesting, as Aaron's also saying, is because when you look at this list, someone's going to want to put their small arms fire into the Ludas. Ludas might be too far. Well, then you might put them into Zod, but they're -1 to wound. They might put them into the boys, yet the boys, the one unit that you really do want to keep around that has enough bodies, therefore making them -1 to hit, really mitigates the effectiveness of all the small arms fires. A lot of small arms fire is already wounding the boys on a 5+, and you're really hoping just to get a wound through. So to change them from hitting on 3s to hitting on 4s and then wounding on 5s makes a big difference mathematically to the majority of small arms fire. Or even if it's already wounding on 4s and it's 4s and 4s, you can see how that sucks. What's up, Brandon? And yeah, okay, final wild horse this weekend. All right, dude, you better bring your buggies. So let's move into the next list, which I have. Oh, showed it to you. We have Florian Powell. Now, Florian Powell, let me actually pull up his event because I think that's important. He was at a good size event this weekend of 44 players. This was in Germany. This is what I was thinking, in Germany. And he did end up getting first place. There was another orc player with Tim Schneider. Shout out to you. I believe he was playing Bully Boyz. But let's take a look at Florian Powell's list. So he has Dr. Green Crump. It's the name of his list. We have Big Mech in Mega Armor. He did pay for Ruckus Warcaller because this is a Green Tide list. Now, you guys know I love Green Tide. Probably my favorite just feeling of playing orcs is just the way I started playing orcs. But I will say I wasn't necessarily sold on the Big Mech with Ruckus Warcaller as in like a necessary tool for the Green Tide, but I do think he is a viable tool. So I like to see that he made an appearance. Then we have 3 Pain Boys. I think you do a great time enjoying your boys when you have Pain Boys. Now, I have seen a couple lists that don't have 3. They can still have success. You're not totally biblically stuck to 3 Pain Boys, but it does make a huge difference. Even regenning D3 boys, 5-up Feel No Pain is ridiculous. On something that have a 5-up Invuln already. Bloodthirsty Belligerent, so your war boss can actually take down something like a Rhino more reliably. Trust me, that is actually more valuable than you would think. 2 units of war bosses, and then 2 units of weird boys. I think you really just need 1 unit of weird boy. But even if you go for 2 or 3, that's fine, as redundancy is key. And I think that the fact that you have 2 makes it so you can flex. As you can see, he has 5 units. He has 6 unit of boys, but one of them is a a minimum size unit, and the other 5 are max size units. So you can take a weird boy, put him in the small man unit. That way you can actually get into places when you do jump. Or you can just choose to put him in the big unit, enhancement guy. Enjoy that, because really that enhancement is game changing. Being able to get better rerolls and get in range of the enemy makes a huge difference with that. So we have 2 units of Gretchen, followed by 1 big unit of Mega Knobs with the twin kill saws. Love twin kill saws. Love the big unit of Mega Knobs. You are wanting to pay for the difference of 6 to 5 because you would hate to run out of guys. Just one guy to the last wound, and then now the leader has nothing to be the leader of, right? Then we have 2 units of Storm Boys because you need something to score. One thing I want to shout out, if you see this for and let us know, maybe tactical fixed. I would say I can see him having just enough stuff here to play fixed, let's say cleanse and deploy. But it does rely on you keeping the Big Mac from getting touched. It does rely on your 10-man unit of boys to go out there and deploy for you, and or your Storm Boys and one of those Gretchen units to do it, because you need to do it every turn, and the boys will be doing your cleansing. So just keep in mind, if you're doing fix and you're making a Green Tide list, you need enough stuff there so you can deploy at least 4 times in that one game. As yes, you are bogging down the primary, but you do still need to keep scoring secondaries so that there's not that late game swing, the last turn games of 15 and 15 for the enemy, causing you to end up losing that game. So that's my strong advice when you're playing the Green Tide. And shout out to Pow War Pig for becoming a member. Whoa, let's go, Pow War Pig. I see you out here, and we're doing that 3,000K membership giveaway for battle combat patrols. So I'm glad you're here. And shout out to the Wicked Joe's 10 Wall Tactics gifted membership. Whoa, for what Wicked Joe. Now, like I just said, any of you that get that, you should be hopeful that you end up getting one of the 2 combat patrols that we're end up raffling. We're end up raffling the old one and the new one, which is the Beast Snagger Boys. So shout out to Wicked Joe for doing that. We appreciate the support. And that's a big deal. Thank you very much. That's very generous of you, and it means a lot, as we use that to make the channel better for all you gets. And yeah, Zed got one. So that's what's up, Zed. And you're new around here. So this is his list. Now let's take a look and his win path. As I like to say, win path is always quite important. We have right here. Sorry, guys, a little brain fart. We have his first matchup, which sadly yet excitingly is a fellow orc player, right? So I only say sadly because we don't want to see the Hunt's win rate just falling down for that. But if you're gonna lose to anybody, it's another orc, right? Because orcs are truly never beaten. So this is gonna be a review of the Hunt list as well. So we have Proper Killy, which I think is arguably top 2 best of their enhancements, especially against Beast Boss. The damage 3 at Dev Wounds is freaking awesome. Glory Hog and Shirley as a Squig Hog. Glory Hog, so you can get that 9-inch scouting potential, and then you get Shirley as a Squig Hog, so you get that built-in -1 to wound as you miss Hearted Nails when you played Warhorde, right? 2 units of Beast Snagger Boys, because he did have 2 Beast Bosses. Followed by 2 trucks, 1 Gretchen unit, 1 Commando unit, 1, 2, 3 units of Squig Hog Boys, but one of those Squig Hog Boy units is simply a 3-man unit. And then 2 units of Storm Boys, followed by 1 unit of War Bikers. So I do think what's going to be interesting about this is you can already see with Florian's list that he doesn't have any vehicles. So what is the Hunt going into? Well, the Hunt is going to look for your Warlord, right? And actually, want to take a look at where his Warlord was when we did that. His Warlord was... Which one of these guys was the Warlord? One of his weird boys, which meant he can keep it out of a targeting range and end up just not giving him the Warlord, so you actually can't do all the Hunt's abilities. So that would suck. Beast Snagger Boys are nice into other boys, but not if the other boys have a 5-up Feel No Pain on top of their 5-up Invuln. Kind of funny how that works. The boys end up kind of having the advantage there because it ends up being a 6-up armor and a 6-up Invuln versus a 5-up and a 5-up, even if they're wounding on 5s and you can reroll wounds. Commandos, in this case, if you end up positioning them poorly, you could just be giving one of those Green Tide units a big leap pad forward, as if they make the charge onto the commando unit, fill up that objective, and box out Squig Hog Boys and other Beast Snagger Boys from getting on the primary. It can end up being a detrimental factor. Squig Hog Boys, like I said, if you're re-rolling wounds into them, you can put 1 damage shots just enough into them, or even something like the Mega Knobs. If they do get caught into a combat with them, surprisingly, the Mega Knobs aren't really that scared of Squig Hog Boys. This isn't a Mazrog leading this unit. These are just the Beast Boss and Squigosaur, and he's really not that killy. Therefore, a Mega Knob unit can totally withstand this. They would reroll saving throws of 1. Then they would simply regen and actually heal one of those Mega Knobs and eventually dwindle down the Squig Hog Boys on the non-wall turns. So shout out to that list. Then we have... which he did end up winning. What was that score? An 86-point win. So it wasn't like a super dive bomb, but it was a pretty successful list. And yeah, Commandos over Snick is kind of interesting. I like that people are doing that. I don't think there's really a bad case for running either Commandos or Snick route. Then in his second matchup, we have Karans with the Hyper Crypt Legion. So Hyper Crypt are still very prevalent and important. So we have Katana the Nightbringer, Katana the Void Dragon, a Hexmark Destroyer, and a Plasmancer, followed by 1 unit of Destroyers, Deathmarks, 2 units of Wraiths, 2 units of Destroyers, a Tombblade, 2 Doomsday Arcs, and a Monolith. Everybody knows a Monolith is super fun because for some reason, why wouldn't 20 warriors jump out of it after it's deep strike right in front of you and then not care about what range they get into of you? Meaning, when the Monolith comes down, the warriors can follow him, get out within 3, I believe, or maybe it is 6, actually. Sorry, brain fart. And in that case, they don't really care about your limitations of, oh, you have to stay outside of 9. They can actually get closer. They can actually end up moving on to an objective for that reason and taking it from you, even if you're screening. So it's really annoying and tedious in that case. Of course, the Plasmancer getting them Crypt 5s is a big deal. And then the Hexmark Destroyer being able to assassinate all your characters. Sadly for them, you simply do not have the volume to kill a Green Tide with this sort of list. And you're really hoping that one turn the Monolith just ends up carrying, but simply it just doesn't have the points, the volume for that, and you take out on board control. So the Green Tide is a hard counter to something like that sort of Canoptic Hypercrypt list. So shout out to the Florian for winning that one, because all of us like seeing the downfall of the Necrons. Now we have Grey Knights. And I will be showing you a combo here that I think is good to bring to your attention, especially for bringing in Grey and Tide, but it is important in all the matchups. So we have Grey Knights with a Brother Captain Stern, a Brotherhood Librarian, Grandmaster Dread Knight, Strike Squad, Grey Knight Land Raider Redeemer, Dread Knight, and then another Dread Knight. So what I wanted to say is that this list doesn't have it. One of the other lists we're going to go cover, but the Castellan Crow / Purifier combo is something that's pretty solid into a Green Tide list. Now he doesn't have it. We will cover it in a bit. But Grey Knights also are one of those armies that do not want to actually contest with squads of boys that are just standing, taking OCM primary, taking Involts 5 of Feel No Pains. They do end up running low on volume, and they hate all the space you're taking up. Of course, they do have 2-up armor saves across the table, but these Dread Knights are simply not out OCing or killing the boys at an acceptable rate. The Land Raider Redeemers as well, they wouldn't love to see the Mega Knobs with the Big Mac with the KFS, but it's one of those things that they have to choose. Am I going to try to kill those Big Mac and Mega Knobs, or am I going to put my volume of fire into the boys? In their case, it can be a bad call for both if they just end up making good saves in the Big Macs, regenning some of their guys, tagging that Land Raider, and then slowly dragging it down. So it's a solid Grey Knight list. It's surprising because Grey Knight lists are going a bit into heavily armored and mechanized, and there are a few of them that are actually elite infantry. So keep that in mind to know their abilities. Of course, they have the ability to get up and run away from you if you get within 9 inches of them. So in this case, it's really behoove you to know that as an Ork player and to use something like Brotobuck Cunning, where you get the battle round given to you for the charge bonus, and then you get the reroll charge on there, and you really try to tag that unit that's trying to get away from you. Or you can kind of bait the person and say, I know you want to run away here, I'm going to move closer over here. And then when you do end up moving closer into their second priority, their first priority, you end up using that ability, that combo instead, and still tagging the units that gets in the way. Of course, you don't shoot at them because then they can also jump away from you. So those little tweaks and knowing that they can do that and screening them with all your bodies does make it a hard matchup for them. And then both of you guys are kind of just hoping that the dice go in one of your all's favor, and that was a 97-point win there. Wait, that was the list I was covering, right? Yeah, okay. Making sure I didn't misclick. As for his fourth matchup, we have Eldari, Artarch Wayleaper, Farseer Skyrunner, the Visarch, and the Yavrin. You don't see no Avatar, Incarn, nothing like that. Guardians, 3 units of Dark Reapers. This is those units that are looking to do high damage anti-tank weapons. If you're playing Dread Mob and Gorkanauts and Morganauts, they could be scared of that, but a Green Tide is not. Shadow Specters, 2 units of Skyweavers, which these guys would hate to see a bunch of boys as well. They're going to try to throw some haywire cannons into them and then be like, dang it, I got to charge you, and then they just get chewed up. Striking Scorpions, they think they could do melee, but not with a unit of boys. 2 support weapons, Swooping Hawks, 3 of them. This is probably their most, counter boys units that they have, maybe the Tropes and the Warp Spiders, if they have the Flamers, which I don't think they do with these Death Spinners. Right now I'm having a brain fart on that. Should have checked that. But other than that, like I said before, running Green Tide with that many bodies and regenning, because you can use a ZP to regen, ends up being a problematic for something like Eldar, where they're looking to do high value damage into them. And then, doing high value damage to them, but not really getting their volume in there, right? And okay, thank you. Death Spinners are actually Flamers, so that's good to know. Okay. And also, one thing I wanted to point out that I almost called was that, and I think he did this on accident. Let me look at the list real quick in case anybody's paying attention. He does have Brutal but Cunning here, but, that's actually the one for regenning CP. Let me see. Yeah, that's the one for regenning CP. And I'd like to think that maybe he misclicked because Bloodthirsty Belligerence is already right here on this list. And you would normally think Bloodthirsty Belligerence with giving reroll advances for the unit and reroll charges. Yeah, and reroll charges would actually be better on a weird boy, but if he decides to put the weird boy with the war boss and then do the jump, he gets both. It's just interesting that he put them on the war boss. I just want to clarify that because I misspoke earlier, and I it's easy to mess those up with the cunning orc rules. So he does have the potential to jump in front of them later in the game, getting a nice reliable reroll charge with +2, +3 to the battle round, whatever it is. So it's actually pretty awesome for that, as orcs have great strats in the green tide. Sorry, I wanted to pull that out. I was having a brain fart when I mentioned that the first time. So then we have his 5th matchup, which I thought was actually pretty fun, which he has the Adeptus Mechanicus in this. So with this Adeptus Mechanicus list, you can see that he has Canis Rex. We went over Canis Rex with his crit 5 pluses and having sustain across the table, good OC and good potential to kill high value targets. Something like a Mega Nob unit gets destroyed by Canis Rex if they can get to him. You do want to hope that you do want your 4-up invul to hopefully save you, and then you bring some guys back and you withstand his damage. But he had some other things on this list. So he has his Qatari Marshal. Oh, sorry. And this was the Qatari Core. So this is their elite basic battle line infantry, pretty much, detachment. Qatari Marshal, Techno Archaeologist, and another Techno Archaeologist. 1, 2, 3 units of Qatari Vanguard. Something to keep in mind is these Qatari Vanguard do actually have 3 shots at 18-inch ranges of anti-4+ infantry. So they do have some small arms fire that can actually bother boy units, as well as when you're on an objective and you're close enough to one of these Qatari units, you take a -1 OC. So you do got to keep that in mind. Then we have a dedicated transport of a Dune Rider. 1, 2, 3 Sky Stalkers. Followed by these sterilizers. So these guys are hoping with their talents when the 10-man units actually get volume of damage onto you as well. Infiltrators, and then last but not least, we have 3 3-man units of these Sakodian Dragoon laser Taz lasers. Let me show that to you guys real quick, as I'm sure most of us don't actually get to see too much Adeptus Mechanicus. So these guys are moving 10 inches, T7, 3-up armor save, 5-up invul, 7 wounds. And a 2 OC. Interestingly enough, they do have a anti-walker 2+, Lance sustain 2 4 attacks, but they are hitting on a 4+. Strength 7, -2, 2 damage. Of course, the 2 damage is good for them into 5-up feel no pains. They're eligible to declare a charge even if they fall back. And when they charge, when they advance. So they can do it when they fall back, advance, they can still charge. And then you can actually try to regen CP on this. So there are combos to that, but we're not going to go over everything, as Adeptus Mechanicus is one of those armies that is kind of niche, but I still wanted to bring that up so you guys knew what they were going against. Of course, you have that Lord Inquisitor Draxus, good against infantry. Overall, one of the most popular allied Inquisitors. And then Canis Rex to go hard into your Mega Nobs. Now, this is a bit of hoping that the dice don't go against you, but you do have all the bodies killing potential into something like this, because none of this army has a good armor of contempt and none of them have great armor saves. Therefore, you are still killing this as a reliable enough rate. I always like to say that if you're playing something like a Green Tide, that you do want at least enough killing so that turn 4 and 5 the enemy isn't making a comeback on kills. But in this case, he definitely wasn't. But very fun to see. Very fun to see that Florian ended up having to go into Adeptus Mechanicus near the end of the round. So that Adeptus Mechanicus player was trying to prove everybody wrong. So shout out to Florian Powell for going 5-0 with the rise of the Green Tide. And using Big Mac with Ruckus Warcaller, because everybody's saying that was a thing. We'll see if GW tries to FAQ that and say that we shouldn't do that. I'm subject to believe that it was actually intended. Now, I will show his list one more time before we move on to our third list of the evening, which will be our final list. But he had the Big Mac was Ruckus Warcaller, 3 Pain Boys, a War Boss with Bloodthirsty Belligerent, which allows for reroll advances and reroll charges. And then he has the Cunning Brutal for CP farming. 5 max unit of boys, followed by 1 10-man unit of boys, 2 units of Gretchen, a max unit of Mega Nobs, 2 Storm Boys, and then a basic Weird Boy alongside that. So, of course, he was thinking of different combos. Most of the time, you see people put Bloodthirsty Belligerents on a Weird Boy himself. This makes me think that he was very much putting a Weird Boy, that second Weird Boy, in that unit, and then trying to use the War Boss's durability to stop himself from being precisioned out and killed. That way he doesn't lose the bloodthirsty belligerents, which some armies will do, trying to kill that bloodthirsty belligerents get. And then when you have the strat to actually give yourself the battle round to your charge roll, makes really, really good at taking the initiative away from the enemy and jumping into someone's backfield. And then farming CP on top of the ground. It's kind of funny. He might have just had weird points for that because he had, because he was like, I'm just going to pay for that. So shout out to Florian Powell. Great job this weekend, going 5-0 with the Green Tide. Now, last but not least, we have our Ork player in the Bully Boyz detachment with Ben Jurek. So Ben Jurek, as an avid Ork player, we're actually kind of not avid, but plays Orks very commonly. This was a super major, a major event. They had about 68 players, and this was in the United States. So last two lists were overseas, across the pond. Now we have them in the USA. So Ben Jurek, which I thought had actually won this event, but I guess not. I don't know if BCP's wrong or not, but either way, he went undefeated. So we're going to cover this Bully Boyz list. Now, like I said, I actually have a slide for this kit. So for Ben Jurek's list, Bullies 2.0. Actually, before I go over Ben's list, you guys can take a look at it. Let me take a look at some of the chats. We see right here, Orks haven't played since 3rd or 4th edition. Would running bikers and buggies be good? Cult of speed, you can. Good is, subjective. I would say the buggies data sheet wise do need a bit of a tweak, but they're quite cheap. So if you have them, you can run a good amount of them. Bikers are quite solid. You can run them in Warhorde and feel good. You can use a trike and using a field note paint on that, take advantage of your bikers in that kind of way. So they're totally viable. I think you should just play whatever you want to play, and welcome back, because we need some more cultist player. We need cult of speed players. So welcome back. We're glad that you're going to be here with your Mad Max flavor. Then we have Jay Hoon with the 5 Wall Tactics gifted membership. Whoa, for Jay Hoon. Shout out to you, buddy. Glad you're back, and you're blessing all our fatter fellow lads of Gork and Mork, because 3K giveaway, boys. 3K giveaway. Once we get the 3K, giving up them combat patrols. So we're looking forward to seeing that. And if you haven't noticed, in the Discord, we're doing a paint challenge of war bosses. Go ahead and look that in the announcements. You can get the details on that. But thank you very much, Jay Hoon, for growing the Green Tide and the Great WAAAGH. Very generous of you, buddy. Like always, much love. I appreciate that. And then, so like everybody in chat's just supporting him in that. So playing the Cult of Speed. So let's look at Ben Jurek's list. We have Boss Snickerot making his appearance for the first time tonight. 3 war bosses in mega armor. One of them with a teleporter enhancement. This is actually very much how I like to run Bully Boyz. You could make arguments for the enhancements, the other ones, but bare minimum, just bring teleporter. You feel good. And earlier, I was asked about Gaz or told about Gaz. What I will say is Gaz himself is fantastic, especially with Mega Nabs. It feels really, really good. And at an RTT level, casual play, you won't feel bad for bringing him, all right? I promise. It feels great. What I will say, though, is that when we look at these GT performing lists of 5-0 undefeated, the vast majority of them do not bring Gaz. And that's because they choose to simply have more stuff, more options, more activations. Gaz is just not. It's because when you bring Gaz, you're also trying to take advantage of Makari's ability of lethal. You don't really have the volume to take advantage of lethal in that, and you're already slow, and you're already kind of being bogged down on OC. You just need more stuff to play the game. And in this case, you can see he brought some flash kits and some battle wagons for that instead of just being straight up trucks. So I'm not against Gaz being in this at all, as in if you're just playing, but just know at the top level events, we just constantly see that Gaz is not brought, though Gaz is fantastic data sheet wise. So we have 3 trucks, 1 battle wagon, 1 unit of flash kits because you just want some shooting, 5 strength when they're straight up punching with their buttload of attacks. So it's feels good, and you still get sustained, you still get lethal. Don't be mad. Just play them in their 5-man units. You'll feel good, but this is actually a 10-man unit. So you can do both. If you're running 5-man units, you can run them SWAT teams alongside those 5-man knobs units that tend to run in Bully Boyz. But in this case, he just took a 10-man unit. 2 Gretchens, 3 units of Mega Knobs, 2 of them being 5-mans, 1 being a 6-man unit for the teleporter guy. 3 5-man units of knobs, all with power claws, and then just simply 1 Storm Boy unit. Little surprised to just see 1 Storm Boy unit, but Ben made it work. Snicker out, hopefully pulling his weight, and all the trucks doing some stuff as well. So let's take a look at his path to victory, like I always like to do. He's the second run right here, guys, in case you got confused. So his first game with a 76-point win, he went into Astra Militarum. So Astra Militarum, though they might not be doing good overall in the meta, just and statistically on paper, they don't do great into Orks anymore. Just know we're going to cover a list because it was Wargames Live. That was very, very interesting. So stay tuned. We have, and it was an Astra Militarum list. We have Cadian Castellan, Gaunt Ghost with their shenanigans, Lord Solar Leontis, Platoon Command Squad, 1 unit of Cadian Shock Troopers, a big unit of that. 2 units of Catachan Jungle Fighters for their scouting potential. A straight up basic infantry squad. 2 Chimeras, which are excellent transports. For only 5 more points, you're getting slightly better weapons than a truck, slightly more durability. So it's just the units that are going in there aren't as good as a truck. So but just know Chimeras right there alongside the basic Ork truck is one of the best transports in the game. Basilisk, of course, that can give you movement. Reduction as you become earth shocked and you can't move, -2, I believe. You have a Hydra, Lehman Russ battle tank, Lehman Russ battle tank, Lehman Run exterminator, and then a Rogel Dorn. All of these do great into something like a battle wagon, and the exterminator does have the weapons, so does the Rogel Dorn to kill Mega Knobs, especially on the non-wall turns. 3 units of Scout Sentinels and 1 unit of Tempestus Scion. So I could see this being a big of a slobber knocker, right? You know that for 2 turns, your Mega Knobs are very much going to be able to hold up, but that doesn't mean he's not going to attempt to kill him. That doesn't mean some aren't going to die, and then they're going to start taking casualties throughout the game and hoping that you can kill just enough of them. They do have some bodies for screening you, taking middle of the board presence so they can actually start to play the game into Bully Boyz, and Bully Boyz don't typically have the volume. This is where a 10-man unit of Flash gets could really rise and shine, right? They jump out, they're wounding them on 2s, they can end up punching a unit without you really caring too much about losing your own Flash Gate unit. So run in there, take out 20 Cadian shocks. They do end up taking the medic, so I think they get a Felix to feel no pain, this med pack right here. That's why having 2 damage on their snagger guns will actually feel kind of good in that case too. So all in all, this isn't like a bad guard list. As you can see, the guard lists are going to vary greatly because guard got nerfed so hard from the indirect loss that they play differently. And like we can see here, this was his lowest scoring win. So that could be matchup mission dependent, but just know guard do just have tools into Orks. Second, we go into his second matchup, which is World Eaters. I like to think Orks do great into World Eaters, especially when you can fight on death with the Bully Boyz. So we have Angron, Karn the Betrayer, which does quite well into heroic challenging characters, like a mega war boss, right? You can kill a war boss, so be careful. Lord Invocatus, or Lord Avocado, Mastery of Executions, getting his fight first into you. Jackals, so they can get some sticky. 2 units of Khorne Berserkers. 1, the 5-man unit is undoubtedly for Karn, and then the 10-man unit undoubtedly for the Master of Executions because it's really trying to defend him, take advantage of his blood surge, and fight first. Then you have a World Eater's Rhino, which I would think is for the 10-man unit. 8-bound, another unit of 8-bound, another unit of 8-bound. So this is 3 units of 8-bound, followed by 1, 2 units of Exalted 8-bound. So this is very much CP management, using your ability to screen with something like I said with Flash Kits, even Grots. They don't have shooting to pop your battle wagon, pop your trucks. Don't let yourself get tagged. Understand those weaknesses and those strengths that you have as an Ork player, because you know they're going to take the initiative from you, right? But they're going to be end up charging into your truck so you can get the clap back on them. You do need to be smart in this, but we have all the tools to really take out World Eaters and beat them. So I wouldn't really be sweating going into a World Eaters player. I just hope Angron doesn't come back 4 times and make it a dreadful game. A dreadful game. But shout out to you for taking out the World Eaters. I definitely like when someone tries to get stuck in with us and we get the better end of it, right? Then we have the Grey Knights. So we have Brotherhood Librarian, Castellan Crow, Grandmaster Dread Knight, and Kaldor Drago. I'm going to show you Castellan Crow and Purifier combo right after I look at this list. Brotherhood Terminator Squad, Strike Marine, Inceptor, Nemesis Dread Knight, Paladins, Purifier Squad, 10 man. So what does a Purifier do on tactics? Well, let's take a look at him. And let's take a look at Castellan Crow. So let's start with Castellan Crow because he's the leader and we all know it's his fault. So he himself has a Purifying Flame, Anti-Infantry 2+, ignoring cover. It's psychic. And then you also get the Storm Bolter shots as well on that for these guys because they get to use both. So you get his Champion of the Order of Purifiers. While this model is leading a unit, add 1 to the attack characteristics of Purifying Flames. So he gets an additional Purifying Flame shot. Boom, he's now up to 4, and he's a Storm Bolter shot, which is another 4. As you can see, the volume is starting to show. Keep in mind, he is someone that's good at killing Ork characters, as he has devastating precision built in. 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 6, -2 damage. So something like a weird boy, hypothetically even a war boss, he can end up taking you out. So just keep that in mind. But what does his Purifiers do? This is the combo that even if you're playing Green Tide, you should be aware of. They are taking Purifying Flames, which is the same profile, but 1 shot only, and they have a built-in -1 AP. So this becomes 2 shots. They still get their Storm Bolter shots, and they are still Psychic Nemesis Force weapons in melee. So you still get the strength 6, -2 damage. So something like Knobs is still getting punched up. Then for their ability, it is each time this model makes an attack, add 1 to the hit roll this unit. Add 1 to the hit roll if this unit is below starting strength, and add 1 to the wound roll if it is below half strength. Okay, so that's the data sheet ability. Not commonly going to come up for us as Orks, but I have seen this played wrong, where the player thinks he just gets built-in +1 to hit innately, and then he ends up just shooting you at hitting on 2s, because these are called Purifying Flames, but they are not flamers. They are hitting on 3s and actually have an actual amount of shots. So I just wanted to show that combo because it is common. People take this as a tech piece against Orks, against Green Tide. So just keep that in mind. So how does this list do into Bully Boyz? Surprisingly, it really does have the potential to kill you, as Nemesis Dread Knights do have good profiles into killing stuff because they're flat damage 3 on the non-wall turns. Your knobs are not necessarily going to kill them in 1 shot unless you get kind of lucky. Kaldor Drago can get the initiative on you and kill you. Dread Knights can can shoot out your trucks, but they don't really kill a battle wagon. So the battle wagon becomes a big factor in this. Our army wide -2, -3 damage for Bully Boyz feels really good into Grey Knights, as they all have a built up 2 armor save. So all these Inceptor squads and Strike Marines that would normally be like, haha, I can stand up to your boy mobs, they end up getting chewed apart and killed. But keep in mind, as I said earlier, they do have stratagems to end up picking up back into the sky if you get within 9 of them. So it's not necessarily easy to run them down. And if you just look to get cheap shots into them from the flash gets, they can also just end up jumping back into the sky as well. So you need to be smart about where you delegate those attacks, where you stage your trucks, and how you actually screen so that you don't lose stuff from the mean green too early, right? Green Knights are great, but you really just need to know their abilities, like Castellan Crow being able to Castellan Crow and Kaldor Drago being able to jump in your face and really punch and knock your teeth in if you're not prepared for that. Now, I want to go over the most interesting list I looked over this weekend, which is very, very fun to look at as someone who looks over lists all the time and actually likes Astromo Time. So we have Dino Riders. So this is on Wargames Live. You can go catch this game. It's a really close game, really back and forth. I really hope that you check it out. But we have Death Rider, Squadron Commander, Death Rider, Squadron Commander, another Squadron Commander. So what does that do? He actually gives it so they get infiltrated for the Death Rider squad, and he gets dev wounds when they make a charge, just so you guys know. We have Solar Leontis, Militarm Tempestus command squads, 1, 2 of them, Primary Psyker, and then Ursula Creed. So we have 1, 2, 3 units of Torox Primes. Then we have the Adelan Rough Riders. So not only do you have the Death Riders, but you have the Adelan Rough Riders. The difference is the Death Riders are getting dev wounds, but they don't have good strength or AP. They also get to infiltrate, so they're kind of initial charge. And then the Adelan Rough Riders are getting actually Melta Lances, high damage ability, great AP. They can actually punch out your Mega Knobs in this case. And of course their hooves get killed, get some punches too from their mounts. You do have a Kazarkin squad here, a Tempestus, 3 Tempestus Scion squads, which are 3-man units, which can come in, do great shooting potential. As if you're in an objective, I believe they get +1 to hit. They have special weapons, so they can end up putting melta shots and plasma shots into your Mega Knobs and your basic knobs. So this list is actually quite killy. These cavalry units are constantly coming back and charging back onto the objectives to get you. I am actually going to show you these data sheets. So one ability from the Death Rider command squad is the fact that they have Lance, 3 attacks, strength 4, only -1 AP, and then their Savage Claws, which are extra attacks from their mounts, are 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, strength 4, -1 AP. So us orcs were like, man, that doesn't really hurt us. But like I said earlier, the character gives them the ability to get dev wounds when they charge. They also have the ability called Screening Line. Once per turn, when the enemy unit ends a normal move or fallback move within 9, not engaged with this unit, you can make a normal move up to 6. So as you're staging to charge them, they can actually stage and charge you even better, or they can get out of your charge range and then counter charge you the following turn because they're movement 12. So that's something we got to keep in mind if you're playing against this. I don't know how popular this is, this one ended up being, but it did make quite a splash, and people do have 3D printers. Then we have the Adelan Riders. So in this case, I think when we looked at this, he had hunting lances, and they were the gold lances. 2 dudes had gold lances. Okay. So the gold lances have lance built in, strength 6, -2 damage for only 2 hits. And then the hunting lance, they either have frag tip, so it's D6 for like volume of punches, but really it's melta tip, which is lance 1 punch, hitting on 3s, strength 9, -4, which Mega Knobs hate to see, for D6 damage. And then they still have extra hooves attacks. As well as they can ignore any modifiers to advances in charge rolls. And in addition, they're eligible to shoot and declare a charge if it's fallen back. So I don't know if it's really falling back when they make into combat with knobs and such. This is where the unit you're going, I'm going to fight on death against these guys. But guess what? They have regimental keyword, meaning they can actually come back and be brought back on the table. So this is a back and forth. You can watch this game on Wargames Live. They had a good back and forth, and I hope that we see a more Astro Militarum list like that again, as it was very, very exciting and very, very unique. Now, last but certainly not least, we have this final matchup, which is everybody's favorite, the Dreaded Sisters. Now, the Sisters of Battle are getting a book here real soon, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but it is what it is. Morgenval, Palatine, St. Celestine, Triumph of St. Catherine, so he can give a nice 6-inch aura of abilities. Battle Sisters, 2 Immolator squads, 3 Arcoflagellants, 2 Castigators, Crusaders, which I don't think exists anymore, Paragon Warsuits, Penitent Engines, Seraphim Squad, and Sisters Novitiates, and Seraphim. So the name of the game here is that they have a lot of good activations. They do have a little bit of killing potential with the Paragon and Warsuits. The Castigators don't do great into Mega Knobs nor Battle Wagons. And then the Arcoflagellants are one of those units that doesn't really die as quickly as you would want. You do like that they are damaged too, but there's a bunch of them, and they do get a stupid volume of attacks with good transport capability. Castigators just don't have enough AP with their battle cannons, only -1. You do still need to be careful with this matchup as an orc player, but Mega Knobs are really carrying the back here, and Flash Kits would really feel good in this matchup, as you actually have something to reach out and shoot the Arcoflagellants, overwatch the Arcoflagellants, put lethal and sustain into the Arcoflagellants, and then even countercharge and punch the crap out of the Arcoflagellants on the wall, because you'll be wounding them at 2s as they're just T3 sisters. So Bully Boyz have a good job of actually running over Sisters of Battle, getting onto their side of the table and beating them up. So if you're running Bully Boyz, you have a great job. Just like Josh out here in your league, shout out to you, buddy. I'm sure you'll do great with Bully Boyz, and I hope you have fun. So we have Ben Jurek going 5-0. I'm not sure if he got first or second at this Wargames event. It looks like second, but I also heard first. So, whoa, for Ben Jurek going 5-0 with the Bully Boyz, letting everybody know that Bully Boyz are still here to stay, and this is the way I like to see them run too. So, shout out to you. But I do think if you're just out there watching this, If you're running boys in there, if you're running gads, those all actually work as well. And we've shown other really good potential Bully Boyz lists. We'll see how Bully Boyz change and develop once Mega Knobs do end up taking a slight point increase. Maybe the war boss or just the leaders themselves will take increases. But nonetheless, we've seen other ways that Bully Boyz can be ran, but this is the straight up successful archetype base point per point that I can agree with, whether the flash kits are two. Let me show this one more time. Whether the units are 2 5-man units of flash kits or just 1 10-man unit of flash kits. This is the way I really like to see my Bully Boyz list run. I don't think you need a 10-man unit of knobs. Sorry, you don't really need a 10-man unit of knobs. You can stick 2 of these units into one truck and get great value. One jumps out, beats something up. The next wall, one jumps out, beats something up. But if you do split this up, like the Flashmints units, you can go ahead and make SWAT teams, end up throwing 5 in each of these trucks with 5 units of knobs as well. So this looks and feels really good, which regardless of which way you ran it. I love Twin Kill Saws for the minus AP factor and great reliability of wound potential. I know you lose attacks, but the wall makes up the difference for that. Rerolling hit stratagem really helps make up the difference for that. And when you're just wounding a lot of stuff on 2s and 3s in the game and rerolling wounds, you know, it changes the math on that. Sure, you're not hitting as reliably, but you're wounding so reliably that it kind of makes up the difference. I'd like to see that the battle wagon is still making its way all around the game between Green Tide, Dread Mob, Bully Boyz. So if you have a battle wagon, just running one, it feels good. Get him up and built up. If you haven't, because he's showing a lot of love, and I don't see him taking a nerf by any points. I think 160 points is an awesome place to be for Orks for the battle wagon. So I really love that. So before I get off and get my closing thoughts, I'll look at whatever more comments and chat you got to say. Thank you for raising the wall energy with the like button. Of course, don't forget to subscribe if you're new around here, because we're looking to do eventually bat reps, lore videos, and so much more with all thing or content related. If you're new about here, we have our Discord. You can do our hobby streams where we show off hobby community pictures. We do hobby challenges. So I know we're called WAAAGH Tactics, but we're actually everything related to the wall. We're talking about the WAAAGH Tactics because I like to show how every way the Orks can be played, not just the most meta way or the most linear, boring way, because that's not really the Orky way. For the Sisters of Battle, they look like they're pretty well balanced, and their codex 120 pages, and you're going to be getting it. Well, Murder, you might be having to give us the download on some of those sister rules when you start knowing them off the top of your head if I end up saying them wrong during any of these streams, because sisters are something that they're not too often seen, but they do make a splash in the competitive scene. So shout out to Ben Jurek for his Bully Boyz list. Doing great. All the Ork players that performed well this weekend. So that's it for our WAAAGH Tactics. Thank you for joining us for another WAAAGH Wednesday. We'll be back with all of these every Wednesday to look over the metas, look over the stats and the facts. The Orks are doing good. They're doing excellent, but they're not doing so great that they're scaring everybody anymore. Hopefully, as more codexes come in, everybody starts to balance out, do rock, paper, scissors a little bit into each other, and that will stop GW from really pulling down the nerf hammer, the nerf bat too hard, as a lot of people are going back and forth on where they think Orks should end up and how they feel about them. I think even if you hurt Mega Knobs, Bully Boyz are still going to be quite potent. You can run 60 boys, 40 boys with them. You can run commandos. You can run so much different kind of initiatives of first wave, second wave of Ork WAAAGHs. So sure, you play your Mega Knobs, but just know that Orks are doing great in every detachment, multiple different ways. Stick around to WAAAGH Tactics so you can learn those ways, because there's one thing to keep in mind is don't cross their wall, because we not get T-foul. Whoa!